Welcome on the Toronto TCG. This is Caden.
And this is Eric.
Today we're going to be looking at my Toronto regional run, and this regional I went with Charizard again because it did so well for me in Peoria. So, and I'm also going to be talking about what changes I made, how I prepared for different matchups, and how my run went. So we're going to start off with the Vengeful Punch. I put it in there for the Gardevoir matchup because it's a little tough for Charizard to keep up since Gardevoir is fast and has the ability to just hit you with single prizers every turn. So, Vengeful Punch says that when the Pokemon this card is attached to is knocked out, put 4 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. Which basically means that if they're down to 40 or 20 HP left, Vengeful Punch KOs them, and then you basically have it fair. So if they knock out a Charizard with like a Zacian or a baby Gardevoir, you knock them out in return, and then it makes them, and then they have to find a way to recover, and then it goes into your turn where you can take another knockout, therefore making it basically 50-50 equal prices.
Yeah, and one of the things I think for those that don't really know the Gardevoir deck too well is that it when Gardevoir EX uses its ability Psychic Embrace, you can attach as many Psychic Energy out of the discard to a Psychic Pokemon, and essentially just take 2 damage counters for each energy. So you can't knock the Pokemon out, but a lot of the times what you end up seeing is the Shining Arcana Gardevoir, which has 140 HP. They will put 6 energies onto it, putting it down to basically 20 HP left, and then that Vengeful Punch really comes in handy there because when they knock out the Charizard, you kind of return the knockout to them.
Yep.
What else did you include in here, Caden?
I also put in a Lost City, well, more of 2 of them. It has the effect that whenever this card is in play, when a Pokemon is knocked out, put it in the Lost Zone instead of in the discard pile. Discard all attached cards.
And what's that going to be good into?
It's good into Gardevoir, Lost Box, and just any that wants to keep their Pokemon around to reuse all the time.
Yeah, it's a really effective card, especially against Sableye, which will be recycled a bunch of times during a game. So we kind of theorized this that we were worried about the Lost Box matchup, worried about the Gardevoir matchup a little bit, and it kind of seemed like a nice little card to put in there just to kind of try to at least soft counter those decks a little bit.
Yep.
And you do have a Pokemon that you added into here too. Which one was that?
It was Radiant Charizard. Radiant Charizard is a very strong card because it has the ability Excited Heart and the attack Combustion Blast. Excited Heart has the effect that for every prize card your opponent has taken, this one's attack costs 1 colorless less. And its attack for 5 energies, 1 fire, 4 colorless. It does 250 damage, and says that it can't use Combustion Blast during the next turn. Now, usually that seems like an insane cost, but thanks to Excited Heart, if your opponent has just taken 4 prize cards, you attack for 1 fire, 3 prize cards, fire colorless, and then so on.
So the idea behind that is that, you want to kind of mess up your opponent's prize map, right? So if they've been taking 2 prize knockouts and they have 2 prizes remaining, you put this single prizer into the active, hit whatever they have in the active, probably in a lot of cases knock out whatever's in the active, especially if you attach that choice belt to it.
Yep.
Because it's hitting for 280 against Vs. Then that kind of messes up their mapping for their prizes because then they have to either hit into the Charizard, which then they only take 1 prize, and then your Charizard's hitting for 330 damage.
Yep.
Or they have to find the boss to gust up something, a 2-prizer, and unless you have an Entei on the bench or a Lumineon, that 2-prizer probably has 330 damage, and that's going to be tough to knock out in one shot. So, how'd you feel like the deck went for you? How did it play for you?
I mean, it was clunky. Like the Charizard, I didn't actually use it all that much. Vengeful Punch was good.
Well, Vengeful Punch can be used into cards like Miraidon
any deck
as well,
you want,
right?
really.
Yeah, I mean, and because Miraidon will hit for, 220 damage, but you've probably hit into a Miraidon or a Chien-Pao even, those decks that are not real good matchups, at least the Chien-Pao, And when they go and try to take a knockout on your Pokemon that has that Vengeful Punch attack attached, they probably already have 180 damage on them, and then you're hitting, they're hitting you, knocking you out, and then they're taking 40 damage and they're getting knocked out as well. So at that point, you're trading 2 prizes for 2 prizes, and then it goes into your turn, and you can take another 2 prizes.
The whole point of the Vengeful Punch was to basically make it to where not only are you down doing 240 damage, but you've also taken a knockout, and it's still your turn. You basically used Yoga Loop if you think about it.
Yeah, it was kind of an idea that we came up with that we thought would be really useful. And when we get into the tournament rundown of what you played against, we'll kind of see whether or not we made a good call there. So you ended up going 4-3 at this tournament. Not the performance I think you were looking for.
Yeah, not really.
Just for those out there that don't really understand the full behind the scenes of everything that goes on in Pokemon, there is a stipend race and a travel award race that kind of goes on amongst the top players in each division for the international championships, which happen 3 times now throughout the year. There used to be 4 times. So there's a Latin American International Championship down in Brazil, and that happens in about 3 weeks, mid-November. There's the European International Championships, which happens in April, and the North American International Championships that happens in June. And if you are in the top 16 of the rankings at the time that the quarter ends, that the IC occurs, right after that IC, then you get a travel award to the next international championships. And if you're in the top 4, you get a travel award, which is pretty hefty, about $5,000 cash reward for essentially to pay for travel. The travel stipend is only $1,000. But still really good for trying to get into these ICs. And we did not qualify. Caden, you did not qualify for the LAIC one because that went on to last season, and we were you had your big performances sort of earlier in the season, so we didn't get the travel stipend even for that one. But for EUIC, which ends in mid-November, we've been kind of pushing to get that travel award and stipend, right? So we were hoping for a better result at Toronto, but you played your best. You did what your deck let you do, and you're still ranked 5th in North America for juniors, so that's good. Probably not enough to get us into the top 4,
Probably not.
but definitely enough to keep us in the top 16. So you'll at least get that stipend to UIC, and I guess we have decisions to make on whether or not we're gonna venture to London this year. So let's take a look at your matchups and who you played against. We'll use PokeStats here, which is a really good website. So you can see kind of the breakdown here. First round, you went up against Brent, and tell us a little bit about that matchup. What happened there?
That was a weird game. So how it began was I went over to my seat and just started just sat there waiting. Then one of the other kids said that my opponent was his friend, and he had just woken up when there was like 15 minutes away from the round. And he ended up being a no-show, so I got a free win.
Yeah, and I mean, we take those. Brent, I've seen his name around. He's a pretty decent player, so it would have been good, I think, for you to get that experience just playing against him. But hey, we take those free wins whenever we can get them.
Yep.
He ended up going 4-3 as well, so he showed up and did pretty well. I mean, ended up doing fairly decent. Second round was Luke, and Luke was playing Mew, and that is probably not the matchup that Luke was hoping to see when he sat down across from you, right? So explain that matchup a little bit for us.
So basically, for Mew, when it comes against Charizard versus Mew, Charizard has a pretty simple line: just kill, kill, kill everything. Like, you just have to knock out everything in your path.
Yeah, and you're hitting Mew for weakness, and hitting Mew for weakness for 3 prizes. It's a really, really bad matchup for Mew, as long as you get set up. Now, Mews can pull those out if they're playing fast enough, and they get everything that they need early on. But for the most part, Charizard is probably Mew's worst matchup in the meta.
Yep.
So that was a win. And then you played Kenji, who is a good player, got top 16 at this, or I think top 16. No, I'm sorry, top 32 at Toronto. And Kenji was playing Arc Duraludon Umbreon. So do you remember anything from that matchup?
I mean, like...
It's a pretty favored matchup for you for the most part.
Yeah,
right?
I don't really remember much. all I do remember though is that they did not really have very good starts. Like one time they started Luminion, another time they started Arceus another time.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, an Arceus decks are just clunky, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
big downfall of playing an Arceus deck. They're very strong when they work.
yeah, especially when it comes to Arceus, they're relied on Umbreon because they don't play any kind of draw engine, unlike Giratina or any other Arceus deck.
Yeah. So it's one of those matchups where if you can set up and they kind of stumble a little bit, you probably got yourself a decent win as long as you have Pokemon that can hit hard enough. Now,
Yeah.
there are situations that come up where you have kind of a tough start or something, they can get ahead of you and sort of get it, but you got that one. And Kenji's another pretty good player that's ranked fairly high. Then you sort of went on a little skid, right? This is where
Yeah.
the little skid happened in round 4. You played against Reed. Reed ended up getting top 8 in this regional, and he was playing Lost Zone Goodra. So, talk a little bit about that matchup and how that kind of goes.
Man, that is not a favorite matchup for Charizard at all. Like, because Goodra has the effect where it takes 8 or less damage and does 200 damage.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it only did like 120 or like 140.
Or even if it just hit for a clean 200 and didn't take that reduction, right?
Yeah,
because it's just the math just doesn't add up there, right? It gets tough until they've taken enough prize cards, but then by that point you're probably behind enough that it kind of just gets to be a big challenge.
Because especially because they have that V-Star Power Moisture Star, which you can use it at any time in the game, and it's not an attack at all. You just heal all damage.
Yeah, all damage from one of your Goodra. Yeah, that's kind of tough. That's a tough one. Reed's a good player too, so I'm sure he knew how to play that matchup really well. He's a Canadian as well, so he was trying to rep for his home country up in Toronto.
Yep.
And just kind of a tough matchup. And then the next round 5, he went up against Theo, and Theo was playing Miraidon, which should be a fairly favored matchup. But what did Theo include in his deck that kind of threw you off a little bit?
It didn't. He played Mew EX, which didn't throw me off. Like, I knew that Miraidons could play it, but like, dude, like
Just makes for tough math.
it usually doesn't. Usually I just go on like straight 2 prizes, but unfortunately he hit me with the single prize on the active. I dare you to knock it out, or
You
if
didn't
not
have a
pass.
choice. Yeah.
Like, the problem was that I didn't have my Pidgeot set up at the time, because, like, it was either dead or I couldn't get it out, and, like, my candies, my Pidgeots, my bosses, they just wouldn't reveal themselves.
Now, did he play Path?
At times he did, but, like,
That really didn't slow you down too much, though, huh?
it didn't really.
Yeah, it was just the Mew. So, yeah, for those of you that don't know, Mew EX, its attack for 3 energy, 3 colorless energy, lets you copy an opponent's attack, and when you get down to 5 prizes taken, and they can put that in the active, and then
They can copy your
accelerate
Burning
energy
Darkness.
to it, they can copy Burning Darkness from Charizard to hit for 330, which is perfect knockout on the Charizard EX. So that's
Yeah.
kind of tough. That is a tough include, and really it's the only way that Miraidon stays positive against Charizard, because generally the Miraidon matchup is not a good one, or I'm sorry, the Miraidon matchup is usually a really good one for Charizard, but yeah, when they have that Mew in there, it gets tough.
Yeah.
Got back a little bit, redeemed yourself a little bit in the next round in round 6 against Daisuke, or Daisuke. I don't know how he pronounces it. I've always seen that as Daisuke. And he was playing Guardy. And tell me a little bit about that. You finally found a Guardy that we were kind of preparing for and thinking we were going to see a little bit of. How did that matchup go? Did the Vengeful Punch come in handy there?
Like, the techs for Guardy revealed themselves. I mean,
That's
like,
good.
they did what they were supposed to do. I lost City'd 3 of his Rolts lines. I mean,
That'll do it.
and I punched him.
Yep,
punched
Vengeful
him in
Punch
the
came in
face.
handy. So, so that was a good win against Guardy, something that we had been kind of practicing and focusing on. Maybe too much. Maybe that was a flaw in our testing leading into
Yeah.
this regional.
Or
We
ma-
were
or
too
maybe-
concerned about Guardy and
Or maybe
Lost
it was
Zone.
just... But at the same time, like, Lost Zone and Guardy are, like, the 2 most popular decks in the format.
Yeah, and Guardy had done really well.
Mm-hmm.
In juniors, where there's some top players playing it. Lost Zone had won a lot of the regionals leading up to this. It had won Peoria. It had
Yep.
won Pittsburgh.
Yep.
So it was one of those decks that we were, thinking was going to be in high volumes, especially amongst the top players. And at a certain point when you're playing into the meta, especially in the junior division, because, generally after round 3 or 4, if you're undefeated, you're going to be playing against the other top kids. So the idea is instead of playing a deck just as consistent as it possibly could be, we were trying to tech in for the decks that we thought we'd see in the later rounds and try to, kind of, I'll be honest, go for the win in this region.
Yeah, this region was like go all out.
Yeah,
Just
go
hope
for the dub.
it.
So normally I think we would have probably played a more consistent Charizard, maybe not focus as much on the Lost Cities, maybe add in another Artisan, maybe not focus on like having Vitality Band, Choice Belt, and Vengeful Punch, which were all kind of tech tools to try to deal with different matchups. And if this was just a region where we were just going to try to get the best result we could and maybe not try to greed out the win, we would have maybe played a little bit different deck. But I still think the deck was solid. I thought you and your coach Jesper Eriksson played, kind of planned out a pretty good deck list.
But the big thing I think was like, I don't think Charizard was the deck for this regional, since like Charizard had been around for a really long time. Like Marions were taking in the Muse.
Goodra was getting played, right?
Yep.
There was a lot more Lost Tina, which is also not a fantastic matchup for Charizard. So yeah, I do think you're right. I think that juniors had been seeing so much Charizard the last few regionals that a lot of juniors were teching specifically against it. I know there was actually one Charizard deck that was being played at the top tables. I think
that was teching for Charizard.
Yeah, it was teching for the mirror very hard with Path to the Peaks and Justified Gloves and all that stuff. So pretty interesting list and stuff and things like that. And then your last round you played against Brandon. Brandon was playing Lost Tina. And that's always just kind of been a tough matchup,
Yeah, you can never really do anything against it.
As long as they get the stuff that they need and they can take that, that delete button on your Charizard, that just makes the matchup really tough.
Yeah, if Giratina didn't have Star Requiem, I think it actually would be like more of a 50-50 matchup. Because like the only other thing besides Star Requiem that holds you back is literally the Lost Mine. So I'm like, there's not much that we can really do against the Lost Tina matchup. So, yep.
Yeah, stuff. So you did bubble in to top 32, which meant you bubbled into points. Very, very important. Still trying to keep your points race up. Taking a trip like this, it was a fairly decent drive for us, about 12 and a half hours. So, you don't want to make that drive and make that commitment for nothing. But, I mean, obviously, if your deck doesn't go for you, that is just what happens. But it was really nice to bubble into top 32 and get those 60 points. You were the only 4-3 that bubbled in. Your resistance was high enough that you were able to get in there. So that was good. Yep. If we're looking for positives from the weekend, that's good. You also finished second in the cup they held the next day. Should have probably finished first. You were playing Chien-Pao in that.
Yep.
So that kind of stinks that you got a double prize penalty in the finals for, I guess, flipping a card over with your sweatshirt sleeve caught a card. Yep. And yeah, sort of unfortunate. That was against a Charizard too, so that was probably an easy win. But Chien-Pao worked pretty well for you in the cup, right? Mm-hmm. It was a good deck choice. So, any last thoughts on Toronto?
Like, not really anything else except like I was hoping that I would have done better. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing that you can do. Nope.
And sometimes the cards just don't go your way. We do have a special shout out though to our friend who came with us, Jake Riggs, who ended up getting top 8.
Yep.
Playing Chien-Pao in the Masters division, so that was really awesome to see that. Kind of got to see that on Sunday as you were playing in the Cup, and he was making his run and ended up getting on stream in top 8. That was really, really cool.
He unfortunately lost, though.
Yeah, he did, but it was a great run. It was as
far as top 8.
Yeah, top 8 is top 8. As far as any of us in our testing group has ever gotten. So, congrats to him. I know he'll repeat that in the future here with another good run. There's no doubt about it.
Yep.
All right. So, any last thoughts, Caden, or is that it?
Well, not really.
All right, well, we're signing off. Tier 1 TCG, make sure to like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.
See you.